Can a person actually live forever? That's what a historical person called Count de Saint-Germain claimed. Records say he was born in the late 1600s, but some think he might have lived since the time of Christ. He's shown up many times in history, even as recently as the 1970s, and always seemed to be around 45 years old. He was acquainted with lots of famous people from European history, like Casanova, Madame de Pompadour, Voltaire, King Louis XV, Catherine the Great, Anton Mesmer, and others. Who was this mysterious man? Are the stories about him living forever just made-up tales, or could it be true that he really found a way to never die? The exact birth date of the man known as Saint-Germain is uncertain, but many people believe he was born in the 1690s. According to Annie Besant's book, which she wrote with an unknown co-author, she claimed he was the son of Francis Rákóczi II, who was the Prince of Transylvania, born in 1690. Some less reliable stories suggest he lived during Jesus' time and went to a wedding where Jesus made water into wine. It's also said he was at the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. The story goes that when Jesus was taken captive and was pulling on the heavy wooden cross, Jesus stopped to rest, and one of the guards shouted at him to keep moving and not rest, to which Jesus responded, "I will rest soon, but you will not rest until I return." The guard didn't really pay much attention to it and continued on, but it was not long after that he noticed that he was not getting older, nor was he able to die, realizing Jesus himself granted him immortality, causing him to suffer and wander the earth forever. These stories are not taken as seriously as the other ones, but would explain his massive knowledge of history and languages. But what most people agree on is that Saint-Germain was really good at alchemy, which is like a mystical way of trying to control stuff like fire, water, and other elements. The main thing alchemists wanted to do was make this special projection powder, or the super rare Philosopher's Stone. They said if you added this stuff to melted lead or other basic metals, it could turn them into pure gold or silver. They also thought this magic powder could make a potion that would make you live forever if you drank it. Some thought that Count de Saint-Germain found out how to do these alchemy tricks. In 1742, Saint-Germain became really famous in the upper-class circles of Europe. Before that, he had been hanging out at the Shah of Persia's palace for about 5 years, where he learned how to make jewelry. When he showed up in Europe, he amazed the rich and powerful nobles with all the stuff he knew about science and history. Plus, he was great at music, had a charming personality, and was super smart. He could speak a bunch of languages perfectly, like French, German, Dutch, Spanish, Portuguese, Russian, and English. Of course, there were many merchants in that time that spoke those European languages. Like if you were born in Switzerland, you speak 3 of them from the start, and from there it's not that hard to connect the others. But what was really extraordinary is that he even knew some Chinese, Latin, Arabic, and even some really old languages like ancient Greek and Sanskrit. Saint-Germain's incredible knowledge made people think he was an outstanding guy. But in 1760, something happened that made folks believe he could be immortal. In Paris that year, a countess named Von Georgi had heard that a guy named Count de Saint-Germain was at a fancy party at Madame de Pompadour's house. Madame de Pompadour was the girlfriend of King Louis XV of France. The countess got curious because she remembered meeting a Count de Saint-Germain back in Venice in 1710 when she was younger. When she saw him again in Paris, she was shocked because he didn't seem to have aged at all. She asked him if he was the son of the man she knew in Venice. "No, madame," he replied, "but I myself was living in Venice at the end of the last and the beginning of this century. I had the honor to pay you court then." "Forgive me, but that is impossible," said the confused countess. "The Count de Saint-Germain I knew in those days was at least 45 years old, and you on the outside are that age at present." "Madam, I am very old," he said with a mysterious smile. "But then you must be nearly 100 years old," said the amazed countess. "That is not impossible," he told her calmly. Then he started telling her things about their past meetings and about life in Venice 50 years before, making her believe he was indeed the same guy she knew. Saint-Germain wandered across Europe for about 40 years, but strangely, he didn't seem to get any older during all that time. People who met him were amazed by the many things he could do. He played the violin incredibly well, like a virtuoso. He was really good at painting. Everywhere he went, he set up this fancy lab, probably for his alchemy brewing. People thought he had lots of money, but no one knew where he kept it because he didn't have a bank account. And even though folks believed he could turn regular metal into gold, he never showed anyone how. He enjoyed hanging out with friends and having meals, but folks hardly ever saw him eating in public. Rumor had it that he survived on a meal of oatmeal. He had some recipes for making wrinkles disappear and for changing hair color. He was crazy about jewels, and his clothes, even his shoes, were covered in them. He found a way to paint jewels perfectly. But that was the least of his jewel crafting skills. He bragged about being able to join small diamonds into one big one. He also claimed he could make pearls grow larger in size. It was also rumored that he had connections with a bunch of secret groups like the Rosicrucians, Freemasons, Society of Asiatic Brothers, the Knights of Light, the Illuminati, and the Order of the Templars. The famous philosopher of the 18th century, Voltaire, who was a well-respected man known for his logical thinking, once described Saint-Germain as a man who never dies and who knows everything. Throughout the 1700s, Count de Saint-Germain used his seemingly endless knowledge about the world in the political and social circles of the European elite. In the 1740s, he gained trust as a diplomat in the court of King Louis XV of France, where he secretly carried out missions for the king in England. By 1760, he took up a similar role in Hague, where he crossed paths with the notorious lover Giacomo Girolamo Casanova. Casanova later recounted this extraordinary man would casually claim he was 300 years old, had the secret to universal medicine, held power over nature, and could even melt diamonds, all of which, he said, was trivial to him. In 1762, he journeyed to Russia and allegedly took part in a plot that helped Catherine the Great ascend to the throne. He then advised the leader of the Imperial Russian armies in a successful war against Turkey. In 1774, Saint-Germain returned to France during the reign of Louis XVI and Marie Antoinette. Rumors suggest he forewarned them about a revolution that would occur 15 years later. By 1779, he had moved to Hamburg, Germany, where he struck up a friendship with Prince Charles of Hesse-Kassel. For the subsequent 5 years, he lived as a guest in the prince's castle at Eckernförde. According to local records, Saint-Germain passed away on February 27, 1784, from pneumonia. For most regular people, that would be the end of their story, but not for Count de Saint-Germain. He just kept popping up, even after the 18th century and into the 19th and 20th centuries. In 1785, people claimed they saw him in Germany, hanging out with Anton Mesmer, who was the guy who started working with hypnosis. Some folks even say that it was Saint-Germain who gave Mesmer the main ideas for hypnotism and personal magnetism. The official records of Freemasonry show that they picked Saint Germain to be their representative for a big meeting in 1785. After the French Revolution kicked off and the Bastille was taken in 1789, the Comtesse de Demas said she had a long chat with Count de Saint-Germain. She said he seemed to know a lot about what was going to happen in France's future. In 1821, she wrote about it. "I have seen Saint-Germain again, each time to my amazement. I saw him when the Queen Antoinette was murdered, on the 18th of Brumaire, on the day following the death of the Duc d'Orléans, in January 1815, and on the eve of the murder of the Duc de Berry. The last time she saw him was in 1820, and every time he looked like he was in his mid-40s, not a day older." Following 1821, Saint-Germain might have decided to adopt a new identity. In his written memories, Albert Van Dam talked about meeting a guy who looked a lot like Count de Saint-Germain but called himself Major Fraser instead. Van Dam mentioned he called himself Major Fraser, lived alone and never alluded to his family. Moreover, he was lavish with money, though the source of his fortune remained a mystery to everyone. He possessed a marvelous knowledge of all the countries in Europe at all periods. His memory was absolutely incredible, and, curiously enough, he often gave his hearers to understand that he had acquired his learning elsewhere than from books. Many is the time he has told me, with a strange smile, that he was certain he had known Nero, had spoken with Dante, and so on. Major Fraser vanished without a trace. Between 1880 and 1900, Saint-Germain's name became popular again. Some folks from the Theosophical Society, including his famous mystic Helena Blavatsky, claimed that he was still alive and busy working on the spiritual development of the West. There's even a photo floating around that supposedly shows Blavatsky and Saint-Germain together. And in 1897, this famous French singer, Emma Calva, dedicated a signed picture of herself to Saint-Germain. There are reports that he even belonged to a group of people who are immortal and are from a hidden civilization beneath the Himalayas. Theosophy is a belief system that talks about an old and secretive group of spiritual beings called the Masters, who are believed to have lots of wisdom and special powers. During World War I in 1914, the Count got caught by 2 Bavarian soldiers. They mentioned he spoke many languages but didn't reveal where he came from. He did predict that the war would end in 1918. The soldiers thought he was a bit loony but listened to his ramblings. He also said something about a ruler from the lower classes wearing an old symbol and leading Germany into another big war in 1939. He said Germany would lose after 6 years, but would do terrible things during the war. The soldiers found him so weird that they just let him go. Around 1930, Guy Ballard met Count de Saint-Germain on Mount Shasta in California. Ballard claimed that Saint-Germain was one of a few ascended masters, just like Jesus Christ. Ballard made a whole religion called the I Am movement, based on Saint-Germain's teachings. At one time, this I Am religion had more than 1 million followers and still exists today. The last time someone claimed to be Saint-Germain was in 1972 in Paris. A man named Rifford Chanfrey claimed that he was the legendary Count, even showing up on French TV and turning lead into gold on a camping stove while the cameras were rolling. However, Chanfrey later took his own life in 1983. So, who really was Count Saint-Germain? Was he a successful alchemist who figured out how to live forever? Was he blessed by Jesus Christ himself? Maybe a time traveler, or just a super smart guy whose reputation turned into an amazing legend.